Hey tankers, what is up? This is Alexbuildit. I got a chance to go to a large tank museum in the middle of Dallas, the Texas Military Forces Museum. In this museum, they have about 29 pieces of armor with some rare additions, which I'll be showing you today with some footage. I'm not the best photographer by any means of the imagination, so the footage is a little rough. First off, we have an M60A1 right outside the entrance. You can actually climb on top of it, there's no keep-off signs or anything like that. And this tank was widely produced. It's kind of like the evolution of the M48, just kind of a better design while keeping the overall shape. Really cool to get to see in person. A little bit, just taking a little bit of a look around. My head, even though I am 6'2", my head comes up to the top of the tracks. I'm holding my iPad up here. That's how tall this thing is. This is one of the museum's showpieces. It's located at the entrance and is kept in really decent shape. It leads down the road to the tank museum itself. Really cool to get to see, climb on, and look around. A little further down the road is a 155mm Long Tom, and you can definitely see why it's called this. Even if I stacked 5 or 6 of them on top of each other, head and shoulders, I would not reach the top. These things were used all throughout the end of World War II, kind of cool to get to see in person. And if you keep going down the road, you get to the Tank Museum Row and Artillery Row, starting with an M24 Chaffee, kept in really decent shape. Produced in the latter half of World War II, it even saw service in Vietnam, but by then it was very easy to tell that this thing was outclassed. If you watched my other videos, I also got to see another M24 Chaffee in another museum, but this is in far better shape.
A recently arrived M24 tank with the 9th Army at Han, Germany, embodying many improvements over its forerunner, the M5, shown on the right.
Another iconic tank, the M26 Pershing, can be found at this museum. Now, this tank was used in the latest part of World War II. In fact, there's some combat footage of it taking out and knocking out a Panther, not this one specifically, but this tank saw service all the way through parts of Vietnam. The general design was carried over into several other vehicle types with just slightly different modifications or turret designs, such as the M46 Patton. Adjacent to the Pershing is the Patton Row. There's 4 tanks, M48, M60, M60A1, M60A2, showing you the development chronologically and in order, which I'll be showing you right here. First off, we're going to go ahead and pass the M48, and if you take a look at the M60, just the plain M60, you can definitely see design elements carried over. A little bit later, you can see the elements in the M60A1, and then the M60A2, a really good picture of how this tank evolved from M48 to M60, to M60A1, and eventually to M60A2. Kind of cool to see how it evolved. This museum also features an M1 Abrams, one of the original batch, at least that's what the curator says. Now, it's kind of cool to get to see one of these, considering some of them are even still in service. Upgraded versions, not the original M1 Abrams, of course, because the original M1 Abrams would be outdated by today's standards and day and age. The gun itself felt kind of small, but of course with modern day technologies, it's the type of shell they use, not the caliber of the gun, so that's not surprising. Going around this tank is kind of cool to get to see the side smoke launchers, kind of look at the side skirts, which could be mounted with reactive armor in nowadays times, a little bit back look at the back engine, and the bottom right I'm showing you sort of the little test drills that the M1 Abrams had to go through. Just going around the tank is actually a little bit bigger than I expected it to be, but not the cannon. The cannon was sort of like a disappointment. I thought the cannon would be much larger. Slightly rare to be able to get up close to one of these, so it's kind of cool to see one in person. Really excited that I got to see this. Next thing I saw was an M728 Pioneer vehicle. I did not even know such a thing existed such as this. It has a crane mounted in back, a bulldozer in front, and one heck of a gun in front. It looks like it's just one huge mortar tube, which is essentially all it is for clearing fortifications. Here's a little bit of footage from this tank.
The support of armor in the field requires a unit which can clear the way for any operation. For this purpose, the M728 has been developed and is proving its worth.
The museum had a relatively rare SPG to see. Well, technically, I'd actually call it a tank, though it's not really artillery in my opinion. The M56 Scorpion. Now, there aren't that many of these left to see in the United States, so this is actually kind of rare to see. Pretty cool, too. It was recently introduced into World of Tanks, like within the last 6 months. This thing is not really armored at all, but it's fast, it's mobile, And this one's actually out of operation, unfortunately, and the back is where they keep the ammo, where that rack would be, and I was able to get into the driver's seat, and the loader seat, and the gunner seat. Those things are all still there, along with equipment bars on the sides. Really cool to get to see one of these things. It's actually relatively small. Here's a little bit of a documentary, considering the airdropping of the M56 Scorpion.
A giant new self-propelled anti-tank gun makes a spectacular sky debut. A baby parachute draws out a bigger extraction chute, which in turn will pull out the 90mm weapon, newest member of America's airborne army. A series of chutes will break the gun as it floats like a feather toward Earth. The broken boards flying away are only temporary platforms for the Silk. Right in step with the paratroopers, here is new punch, power, and speed for the sky fighters. Six giant umbrellas swing and sway the weapon to a perfect three-point landing. Able to travel over almost any terrain at a top speed of 30 miles an hour, the anti-tank gun is ready and raring to roll.
Another SPG I got to visit was the M44. Now, the M44 was produced during the later part of World War II, and it never got to see Korea or Vietnam because it was deemed insufficient for what they needed. It carries one heck of a huge 155mm howitzer, and this is me holding my iPad way above my head. I don't even come close to the top of this vehicle. It is ginormous. It's such a huge silhouette. No wonder this thing one-shots people all the time in World of Tanks. The gun is ginormous in real life. It's like just one huge howitzer tube, like the M728. It's just all gun. Really cool to get to see one of these. Yet another SPG they have at this place is the M10A2. At 203mm, this SPG was one of the largest calibers ever produced in modern day times by the United States Army. Now, this thing was produced after the Korean War and was actually exported to several other countries. In fact, some countries still use these. 203mm, that's just huge in modern day combat. It's really cool to get to see this and the huge shovel that would have to dig into the earth to fire such a massive artillery. Amazing. It dwarfs the M44's gun in comparison. Another item of interest, the M24 Duster, called so because of its ability to dust the air with anti-aircraft shells. It's kind of cool to see because I've seen this on TV before. It's actually pretty tall. Here's a little documentary of one shooting down an airplane.
Here, the Army Training Center gives advanced individual training in firing the various air defense weapons against a variety of targets. For instance, the twin 40s are put through their paces.
Probably the coolest thing I got to see, though, was a Hetzer, 4,000 miles away from where it operated, a true German Panzer. You don't see these too often anywhere. Very cool to get to see one of these. Used in late war. Hetzer's gonna het, you know? Just amazing, mind-blowing getting to see this. Next up, we have a good old-fashioned M7 Priest, an artillery mounting a 105mm cannon. Produced in the middle of World War II, this thing could pack a punch. It's actually mounted on an M3 Lee chassis, but of course without the whole upper hull. The upper hull was kind of taken apart and deconstructed. This thing is actually much taller than it appears to be. I mean, I'm 6'2" and I can't reach the top. Kind of cool to get to see one of these. And I saw this weird thing, and it claims to be an M7 Priest, except for it's like they mounted an extra gun mount for the machine gun, and the gun just a little bit higher compared to the previous model. This isn't natural. The gun mounting should be exactly one gun size lower, and that mount for the machine gun should be one lower. That's just weird. Next up, an M4 105mm howitzer. Now, this thing was used to sort of change M4 with direct firepower punch. This would not put a hole through armor, and this was very thinly armored, but it would certainly be good against anti-infantry and anti-fortification, so sort of like an artillery set on an M4, 105mm. Also, one of America's most produced tanks, the M5A1. It's really common to see these all around, actually. Kind of cool to see them. They're about taller than I am, and it does not look like 4 people could actually fit in there. They must have been really cramped. Here's some footage of an M5A1 plowing through a hedgerow. Cool to see. Museum also has an M108 field artillery piece, a self-propelled gun. This thing was produced after World War II, used in the Korean or Vietnam Wars. It's actually kind of disappointing. It only has a 105mm gun. Compared to other guns, like on one on my left, which is 203mm, it's kind of small. Here's a little documentary about it.
The same tube as on the M102 is employed on the self-propelled 105mm howitzer M108. On this weapon, the tube is fitted with a chamber evacuator to pull gases out through the muzzle, providing crew comfort and safety. The full 6,400 mil turret traverse of the M108 gives it the flexibility required in modern self-propelled cannon artillery.
In a shed behind the museum are several field artillery pieces, like this French howitzer. This really long gun, seriously, it's like as long as the gun on the Grill 15. Everything's out of proportion when you're taking video. This thing is really long and it's unidentified. Do any of you guys have a clue what this thing is? It's just really crazy. It might be captured for all I know. And behind the museum, there's also another 105, like you saw on the M4 Sherman and several various artillery I've shown you. And a captured German field artillery piece. Very cool to see that. And a very iconic 122mm Soviet field artillery piece. Iconic because it's used on so many German tanks. Not like T-34s, but like IS-2s, some SUs. Very cool to see. And if you keep going a little bit further past the shed, there's a 105 cannon behind the parking lot, which also has an M60 tank, which I showed you first in the back. And if you go back inside the museum, there's some more captured German stuff, like a PaK-38 and a SKDF Halftrack. Cool to see that, because it's so far away from where it was actually seen in combat. Very cool to see, and behind that's the Hetzer. You can see the gun poking out. Also, they have a Weasel, which was a transport that can apparently go 6 feet underwater and keep on rolling. And what looks to be just a glorified crane put on a tank chassis, an M578 recovery vehicle. Don't know much about that. They also have an assortment of armored cars in the rear. Different ones, like a M114. Also, they have some other ones that were used in other wars, such as the M75. One that had a machine gun mount, an M59. I think it's just an upgraded version to the right of that, an M84. You can definitely tell similarities between the two. One that fired rockets, an M577A2. The rocket launchers were on the back. Smoke launchers on front of this one, an M13A2. And a captured Soviet, I have no idea what this thing is, but it looks cool. Anyway, thanks for paying attention through that very long thing. Hopefully you actually learned a thing or two about all these tanks. Very cool to see these things in person. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for 2,000 subscribers. I may or may not do a giveaway coming up in the future. It depends if I can get my Club Workman Gold into some tanks that I can give away. We'll see. Thank you guys so much for watching. Alexbuildit out. Blitz on, tankers!